Hey, Hoy, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks for coming on.
Are you sure you're very well?
I think I am. A little accident, but I'm
You
good.
want to tell everyone why I asked such a question?
Yeah,
I'm
and
not
that's a
really
good lead
very
in.
well.
It's a good lead in. It's a good lead in. Actually, you were supposed to be the first person in studio with me since I started. Um, and we were scheduled to do that 2 weeks ago,
Right?
but I got into a hiking accident. I was with Nguyen and Michael, another friend of mine, and I got a bit of trouble and broke my leg and was in the hospital for. So you were so we have to do Zoom. I'm terribly sorry for that. I know you
And
want to do in person.
and I am therefore wondering why you say you are all right, even though you just broke your leg. I mean, like, yeah, right.
Well, isn't that weird how we, isn't that weird how we communicate? I mean, many times where people in the public or people just in being casual or formal, we don't really tell people how we really feel. And I think having having a chance to sit with you like this after what a good 20 years of knowing you, I mean, not really ever having a chance to really being this candid, right? What we're about to do.
Yeah, and also I never had a chance to talk to someone who says he's totally all right when his leg is broken. So how are you? You tell me.
Thank you. I'm doing much better now. I'm on the third week of recovery. I had a surgery for 2 days, and
Which
my
bone did you break?
my right leg, right above the ankle, the tibia, and the fibula both broke. It was a clean break, and they put a rod or two in to the bone, and there's pins and stuff like now. But it's healing well.
First of all, I'm sorry, man, and secondly, I mean, how on earth did you get to that point?
We, me and the boys, we hike every day in the morning, really early at 6 in the morning. It was really dark going up the Altadena, Pasadena mountains up a Cheney Trail. And I sometimes walk backwards because if you walk frontwards up, your quads get locked up sometimes. So I turn around and I like to talk to the guys. We were going up a particularly narrow trail, and it was a dirt trail. And there's pockets of holes, thousands of little holes and ditches up on the mountain. And my right leg got caught in one of the. It's like a 5 inch ditch. It's just like that big of a ditch, and my right leg got caught. My body went the other way, and it just snapped the leg, and it was like a loud twig, snapping. And the guys were like, "Can we carry you down?" I'm like, I don't think so. I can't even move it out of the ditch. It's only like a 3 inch move out of the ditch. Couldn't even move it out. It was so painful. They called 911. Search and rescue came. But half an hour later, there was like a dozen men on the top of the mountain with a stretcher that's attached to a big wheel, and they put a cable on it, and then slowly these 10 guys brought the brought me down. I'm like, brought the body down.
And were you at any stage in danger?
No, I don't think so. In terms of like an artery bursting down there or anything, or I didn't hit my head or anything. No, it was a very clean break, very freak accident. But it made me realize how important it is to tell our children, wherever you go, you have to go with another person. Because if I fell down and rolled over on the side of the mountain and fell into or the ravine there, I'd be fucked. I'd be screwed. Yeah.
And and not to walk backwards while you hike up. I mean, that's
I
what
mean, a
I'm.
lot of people hike backwards. You have to give your quads a rest and then work your hamstrings, right? It's normal, but not in a treacherous terrain like that. On a wide road, yeah, but not that. Yeah, it's
Well,
pretty,
you,
pretty stupid.
you have met my 10-year-old son. I think I'm just not. I'm just going to tell him, don't walk backwards.
Don't hike. Don't do
Don't
anything.
copy Uncle Ken. He's tough, but you're not as tough, so don't copy.
Well, it was a very simple thing. It wasn't. Who would have known? Yeah, who would have known?
Which takes us to life, right? I mean, we never know how life is gonna sort of
Turn out.
a chance on you. You never know what life is gonna do to you or do for you.
One of my questions that I had at the very end of this show episode, actually, is the very same question. Let's talk about it before we even get down to that last question. My question was, how much of your life, looking back now, do you think was sort of like planned? And I don't mean like the school or, you know, what you wanted to study. How much of the sort of the journey that you've taken, how much you think of it is planned, unplanned, luck, sort of like the tides just rolling and taking you to wherever you've gone? How much of planning did you really do, looking back?
I would say half half. I mean, I think you can plan somewhat the trajectory of your life, but I just don't think that you can ever fully control it. I mean, it is nice hearing sayings like, you're the master of your own destiny. It's nice to hear that, and I think that to believe in that. But if you have the 100% faith in that, then I think you set up for really misery and failures, because a lot of things in life just happen because it happens for a reason. The fact that you meet your future partner, the fact that you have a kid, those are huge, important decisions in your life, and important happenings in your life. But gosh, I mean, it's all by chance, right? I mean,
Right.
you meet a girl at a bar or online, you have a kid, you plan with your wife, or you accidentally have a kid with your partner. Those are just mere chances. I mean, you can't control that. And all decisions stemming from that will then have to close certain doors and open other doors. And then will take you to different, I would say, turns in your life. And the biggest turn in your life, which is when you were born, you're born with certain characteristics, whether you are healthy or not. I think health plays a crucial factor in your life, but health is something that you don't have any control over, right? So I would say I've tried a bit to be in control of my life, to get an education, to do what I want to do, but at the same time to also realize my limits. It's a human limit, and the human errors and the human triumphs, they're all human.
It's messy sometimes too, right?
Just like democracy.
Yeah, and we would definitely get into that.
Things are not supposed to be clean,
right?
This world,
It's a messy process.
Yeah, and because human life is messy, but it's beautiful too. Yeah.
So when you went to school, I mean, did you know eventually you're gonna school, right? Would you say?
Yeah, but which one?
Early, the first one, university, first time out of high school. Did you think about all of the refugees and the work that you were going to be doing in the next few years? Did you have a vision of that, or how did you fall into that?
Well, I like to think that school is not just confined to university. I like when people ask me, has schooling helped me in any way? I would say my primary and half secondary schooling in Vietnam helped. My high school experience in Australia helped. My university's education helped, and then my master's helped, as well as my postgrad studies helped. Sure, I mean, each played a part. Certainly with my, I grew up in Australia, and for those who don't really know about the Vietnamese community or I myself, I was born in 1970, so the Vietnam War ended in 75, right? So that was when I was only 5 years old. So I don't have any memories of Saigon before 75. I only know the peaceful Vietnam. I don't know anything about the war in Vietnam. So growing up in, partly in Vietnam, and then in Australia, and then I got an education in Australia. I mean, I really wanted to do law. That's what I knew that was what I really wanted to do. Even though
Sorry, you said you wanted to do what?
To do law.
Law, got it.
Law, yes, yeah, law. So in Australia, the university system in my time was that after you finish your high school, you go straight to university and you go straight to law school, as long as you get the marks. So I got the marks and then I got in. Despite my then broken English, I mean, it's still a bit broken now, but it's a lot better than a fresh off the boat refugee who came to Australia at the age of 15 without a word of English. So the first 4 years was really assimilation and formation years, as as a guy who really wanted to fit in, as a teenager who wanted to fit in. And then university was a time when I started broadening my horizon, as in intellectually, legally, socially. So yeah, it's a hugely development stage in my life, probably more so than the average Australian kids, because I was learning so much. I was trying to play catch up all that time. Yeah.
Well, what inspired you to kind of take the leap into the work that you were destined to do in the next 10, 15 years?
You mean
what encouraged you? Yeah, back
then. No. I mean, I have to credit that not with my own ability, but rather the opportunity that I had when I just finished my 3rd year of law school. So in Australia, it's 5 years plus 1 year of internship, so that's 6. So halfway through my law school, I got a job with a really phenomenal, inspiring human rights lawyer. Her name was Pam Baker. She was one of the most, I would say, well-known human rights lawyers in Hong Kong in the 90s. And I mean, I have to take you back to the early 90s and the community then. It was right at the end of the fall of the Berlin Wall, right, and the Cold War. And it was at the height of the Vietnamese boat people exodus. And my dad was a boat person, and so I think that all Vietnamese of my generation, those who were born in the 70s, we grew up, especially those who grew up in the West like us, I would say the Vietnamese boat people exodus was the biggest humanitarian crisis confronting our conscience. I would say so. At the time, it didn't feel so, but now looking back, I think that was the most confrontational crisis within our conscience, because on the one hand, we could see things happening in Somalia, Ethiopia, the fall of the Berlin Wall, but there are hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese refugees who are stranded in refugee camps across Southeast Asia. So I guess guys growing up during that period just wanting to find out more. So I wanted to find out more because of my background, because of my dad's background, and because it was at the height of the boat people exodus. I just wrote to an organization here, actually. I was in Australia, but I wrote to an organization here in the US called LAVAS, Legal Assistance for Vietnamese Asylum Seekers. And it was set up by another amazing human rights lawyer, Dan Wolf, who's now a great friend of mine. But he's about 10 years my senior. And so at the time he helped set up, at the time was, I think, the first non-profit legal aid movement for Vietnamese boat people in the West.
And he was, what was his name again?
Dan Wolf.
Dan Wolf.
Yeah, he's the founder of Lavas.
What inspired him to start it?
You got to ask him, mate. He lives in DC now. He's the founder of a group called the International Life Fund. He later on he became really successful with his human rights work, and he won multi-million-dollar compensation cases for Americans hostages during the first Gulf War. But at the time, in the early 90s, Dan and I met up in Hong Kong in 1992, and I wrote to Lavas, and I still remember Lavas at the time did not, or rather was not looking for any volunteers to go to Hong Kong. So then, luckily, they passed on my info to an NGO in Australia called the Australian Lawyers for Refugees, Inc., ALRI. And, oh my God, I can't, oh, that's right, Michael. One day, Michael just called me from ALRI, and he said, oh, hey, my name is Michael, and I am part of ALRI, and I got your information from Lavas in the US, and we are looking for a legal assistance for Pam Baker. And at the time, Pam Baker was like the leading human rights lawyer advocating for the rights of Vietnamese refugees, but she was still attached to a law firm in Hong Kong called Knight and Ho. This was before Pam kind of like got into trouble with the Hong Kong government, and then, you know, she left the legal aid department there. She left Knight and Ho. This was all before Pam set up her own legal firm. And you know, like my relationship with Pam and with the whole group, you know, kind of like lasted for another 10 years until Pam died in, I think, 2002. So yeah, this is way before that. And I went to Hong Kong to volunteer and worked for Pam Baker as her legal assistant for 3 months.
Okay, let me stop you right there. When, it's crazy. Guys like me growing up, just, you know, a little bit younger than you, and, you know, we hear about stories of guys like you. Very, very rare that we hear of a person like you that goes. But whenever I did hear about it, I was always wondering, you leave an education behind, you leave all of the luxury.
I didn't. I only left for 3 months.
Okay, but leaving for 3 months and not really kind of, I come from a very money-driven background, you know, Asians and parents and my society where I grew up in LA and Orange County, we're very money driven, and a community that's very into that because of the trauma that we've experienced, you know, leaving a place, you know, a country that fairly well-to-do group of people that were refugees that left, and now they're just trying to make all that money back, and, you know, the pressure on their kid. But having you go to volunteer for 3 months, I mean, what goes through your mind? I mean, you know, how do you get paid? And is it just something temporary? Is it something that you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna do this for a little bit, and I might be able to dedicate the rest of my life doing this work?
Well, thanks for kind of like giving me some sort of credit, but I actually don't think of it like that. I actually think of it in simpler terms, and I think in more realistic terms for me. I don't think 21 or 22-year-old guys at the time would have a 10-year plan. No, it was certainly not me. At the time, I just knew that I wanted to work during my summers. You know, as law students, we would like to do summer clerkship or internship. So for my second year, I already had an internship with I remember the ATO, the Australian Taxation Office. It's like the equivalent of the IRS here. And I love going to work during my summer so I can learn more, and, you know, I can earn a bit more money. Mom and dad were teachers, and then, in Vietnam, but then dad had to go back to university when I went to university so that he could get his degree back. But my mom's English was so bad, so she was just stuck in a factory all the time in Australia. So You know, I didn't grow up with a lot. So I just wanted to go to work, to not just make some money, but also to learn so many things about life, you know, how to put on a tie. I remember that was during my second internship, how to put on a tie. And my first suit was when I was, 21 years old, you know. I bought my first suit. So that was beautiful. That was great. But no, there was no plan. There was no 10-year plan. It was simply the case of, I want to travel. Who wouldn't want to travel when they're 21? I want to do good. I mean, who wouldn't want to do good? I think everyone, all of us, strive to make an impact, small or big, you know, in our own ways. So that was my way of not just wanting to help others, but it was for me, you know. I wanted to find out about my community, about the Vietnamese community, about the legacy of the boat people. You grow up with mom and dad telling you all about the stories of Vietnam before 75, and then I lived in Vietnam after 1975 when the communists took over. I went through all that, but I never really put all the sort of pieces together. I think when you're from the age of 15 to 20, all I wanted to do was to be an Aussie, you know, like to speak English properly, to get a girl, to be able to understand jokes and laugh with my white friends. You know, I think that was what I was going through as a teenager. I kind of really didn't really understand how the Vietnam War started and then how it ended. And then all the repercussions and all the persecutions that followed. So at the back of my mind, I think that was what pushed me to, why can't you just travel and learn things too? And then you also earn a living, you know, who wouldn't want that? So it was a beautiful, beautiful, I would say, opportunity for me to be given such a great chance at the age of 22. As I was going through law school, as I was going to become a lawyer, to find in Pam Baker a most wonderful mentor. And a mentor in not just being how to be a proper lawyer, but how to be a human being in this world.
When you are 22, you arrive in Hong Kong and you go to work for Pam Baker. That's a 3-month stretch. Did you get to go to the camps right away, or were you just working in the offices right away?
No. I mean, she needed me to go to the camps. She doesn't speak a word of Vietnamese, so she was looking for a legal assistant who can help sort of, you know, do summary of cases for her, who can act as her interpreter, her translator, her go-between. Pam was nearing 70 years of age. Wow. I mean, I was 22, so it was a very unlikely couple. And so there was just me and Pam. And it was such a beautiful time because I learned so much about the history and about law, but also how to live on my own. And so for me personally, that was a most beautiful but formative time as well. That led to me going back to Hong Kong for 5 consecutive summers. So I loved the work so much, and I loved Pam so much, and I appreciate the differences that kind of like I would see at home, and then in Australia, and then kind of like during my summer, then I would see people in detention, and seeing that I can play a small part in making a difference. And to roam about Hong Kong in the 90s. It was just a most beautiful time.
Wow. What was your day-to-day like during the first 3 months? I mean, you know, was the office in the camp?
No, so Pam at the time had an office in Mong Kok. So Mong Kok is the most crowded place in the world, like the most densely populated place in the world. So Pam has a very small office within the firm of Knight and Ho, and Pam has a secretary. Her name is Michelle. I don't know what Michelle is doing these days, but there was Michelle, there was me, and there was Pam. So Michelle is Chinese, Hong Kong Chinese. So Pam specialized in family law. So she was only doing this legal work for Vietnamese refugees on a part-time basis. And, she would take in volunteers like myself. I just happened to be the first one from ALI that was sent over. So Australian Lawyers for Refugees Inc. paid for me for my apartment on Lantau Island. So Lantau Island is about an hour by ferry to Hong Kong Island.
Okay.
And at the time, there was no airport yet. The airport was still at Kai Tak, which is the old airport, where if for Hong Kongers or people who know about Hong Kong, before 1993, all flights would arrive on Kai Tak, which is on the Kowloon side, not on Lantau Island. The airport right now is on Lantau Island on the northern end. So every morning I would get up at, I think 6. I get up at 6 because my apartment, in order to get a cheap place, you have to go out on the island. You don't have, the NGO ALRI didn't have enough money for us to rent a place on either Hong Kong Island or Kowloon side. So I would have to, sort of like live out on the island. So it cost only like, I think $500 a month or something. And then get the ferry in. And the ferry takes an hour to Hong Kong Island. And then from Hong Kong Island, you get the MRT to Mong Kok. And then I walk to her office. And I would get to her office. If I don't have to go to the camp, then I had to be at her office at 9. So if I leave, and then the ferry runs every half hour. So I would get the 7 o'clock ferry, get to Hong Kong Island at 8. And from 8, then I walk and then, get to MRT. And, by the time we get to Pam's office, it will be at 9. But if we have to go to the camp, then I wouldn't go to Pam's office. Right. I would go to the UNHCR office. At the time, there were over 100,000 Vietnamese refugees incarcerated in several camps. So, there's High Island camp, there's Nay Ku Chau, Hai Ling Chau, Tung Chau, there's a lot of camps. So it depends on which camp I would go to. If I go to the Hai Ling Chau camp, which was kind of like right in front of my apartment, but kind of like really far. So then there's a special kind of like government boat, like you get on that government boat and then you go straight to Hai Ling Chau, and then I would meet up with Pam there. And then we go to the camp, and then, we worked. Depends. I mean, usually we work all day with a break for about an hour, and then we go back either to her place or my place. I would say we go to the camp 3 or 4 times a week. We go in there, and Pam would have, I don't know, like thousands of people waiting for her to give them the legal advice they need for their refugee status determination process. So, I mean, just to give people a bit of background, from 1975 to 1989, there was basically no screening of Vietnamese refugees. Any arrival would be given automatic refugee status, considered as genuine refugees. And therefore, they'd be entitled to, not entitled, but they'd be eligible for resettlement in the West. So my dad left Vietnam into 1980. He hopped on a boat. He was on the high sea for 10 days, nearly died, got to Thailand, but he was in the camp for only 3 months. And then he got picked up by Australia and got resettled in Australia. Mm-hmm. But by 1989, there was really compassion fatigue. The end of the Cold War has ended. I mean, you've got to look at the Vietnamese boat people exodus and the history of it being intertwined with the Vietnam War and the US involvement, and therefore the international involvement. Um, for many of us, we thought that, oh, you know, Vietnam War ended, people fled by boat, and then the US and Australia and Canada were just taking refugees. Well, it wasn't that simple. The Vietnam War was led by the US, but it was an international force, right? I mean, there were Filipino soldiers there, there were South Korean, there were Thais, there were Australians. So when the war ended and when hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese had to flee because of persecution, including my family, basically the US called a meeting in Geneva, and it's called the 1979 Geneva Convention. So from 75 to 79, it was just like an ad hoc policy of taking in Vietnamese refugees. Mind you, they called at the time the Indochina refugees because there were refugees from Laos and from Cambodia as well, because the civilian government was also overtaken in April in Cambodia by the Khmer Rouge. So there were lots of Vietnamese and Cambodians fleeing their homeland from 75 to 79.
Right.
And they fled to Hong Kong, they fled to the Philippines, they fled to wherever they could flee, to Indonesia, Malaysia, to Thailand. And the West did not take enough refugees in, so there was increasing swelling of the populations within the camps. And so you talk about hundreds of thousands of people, resulting in Malaysia being so fed up of it, just pushing boats out to the sea. They've made it to shore, they've made it safely to shore, but they would just be pushed out and then they would get killed. And they would die on the high sea the second time. So because of this humanitarian disaster that was happening, the US called a meeting in Geneva with the international committee, meeting up, and they devised a plan. They basically said, look, anyone who arrives from countries like Cambodia or Vietnam will get automatic refugee status, and the asylum countries don't have to worry so much because the Western countries will take them.
Wow. And this
so
was 1989?
1979. And that policy lasted for 10 years, from 79 to 89. All arrivals would be just like housed for, months, and then dispersed. As it went by, it would be years. So by 1989, there were so many people already. So then, again, they met up in Geneva, and they devised another plan called the CPA.
Can I ask you this? In 1979, that meeting goes down, it gets signed, Western countries admit all these refugees. Does the word go back to Vietnam and say, hey guys, all the West is opening up, just get on a boat and get out of here? How do people know? Is it something that is let out and, sort of announced in, families writing letters back home and saying, hey, they're opening doors, just get out. As long as you can get out, just, you have a place to go. You spend some time in camp and then you'll get resituated.
No, it wasn't like that. Well, first of all, this was during the really tough times in Vietnam. I was still in Vietnam at the time in 79, 1980, right? I mean, Vietnam was going through rough times. Their economic policies were failing. So I remember, like, my family, for the first time, we didn't have enough rice to eat. So we ate, cassava. So we had to mix rice with cassava because there wasn't enough rice to eat. There wasn't enough oil. I remember, like, I was, anyway, my family story is another story, but my family was in Saigon, but after my dad was released from re-education camp, then we were not allowed to live in Saigon. So we moved to this, at the time, this island called Phu Quoc.
Which is now a resort.
Which is like really developed now, but at the time it was like back end, right?
Exile, yeah.
And like we were exiled to that island, and there was no water supply, there was no electricity, and not enough rice to eat. So that was a very tough time from 77 to 81, when then my family was allowed to go back to Saigon. um, at the time, what I remember was that people started fleeing, but it's all illegal in Vietnam. So at the time, Vietnam wouldn't let anyone leave Vietnam freely. And you certainly would be in prison if you get caught. So I actually got caught on one of the occasions when I tried to escape Vietnam with my dad, and I was only like 8-9 years old. But I got caught and I was in prison for like a month. So no, I mean there was no such announcement, and the agreement with the Vietnamese government was only that they would allow for the ODP, for the orderly departure program to take place. That is to unite families, such as my families, you know. So dad escaped Vietnam, then he went to Australia, but then how will my family be reunited? So I think during the time, Australia and other countries were trying to engage Vietnam to that extent. Vietnam would not let more people leave, but people still left. I mean, like, you know, because of the conditions in Vietnam. But at the same time, they would allow for families to be reunited. So starting from around 82, 83, that was when the ODP was implemented.
I'm have scheduled in a few weeks to interview with Bắc Lê Văn Khoa. Sorry, Lê Xuân Khoa. And you know, I've had a few conversations with him.
He's great. I mean, I first met Bắc Lê Xuân Khoa in the 90s in Hong Kong. My first meeting with Bắc Khoa was in Hong Kong when I was 22.
Well, I'm so excited to talk to him, and I know that his story, your story, it's all integral in the Vietnamese story.
Yeah, but he has done. I mean, he's a legend. You know, he at the time I think he was already head of CIRAC. He was head of the Southeast Asia Resource Action Center, and he was instrumental with not a lot of people know about this, but he was instrumental in the rover program, and that was for people who did not pass the screening test in Hong Kong after 89 because of the CPA. They went back to Vietnam, and then they got a chance to go to the States. And I think there were like, I would say about 30 or 40,000 people that got resettled here through that program.
I read some of the stuff.
Not a lot of people know about it.
Yeah, I read some of the stuff on him, and I'm like, regular Vietnamese people like me, we're civilians. We have no idea the kind of contribution and the giants, the shoulders of giants that you, Bắc Lê Xuân Khoa, like these people have really paved a way, and this is not really talked about because it's not. Sometimes it's just not. It just hasn't been the right time and politically the climate or whatever to be discussed. But I think now it's important to talk about because so many years have passed by. But these stories and these people deserve, like you and Bắc Khoa deserve many hours of discussion of the things that happened from your point of view. And I am very interested in it. I know there will be many, many people who are very interested in the historical aspects of what went on.
Yeah.
So you go through the camp, you show up for 3 months, your first 3 months, and you see hundreds of thousands of people in these different camps. I mean, can you describe like the conditions and what was going on in your mind at the time?
Well, I'll tell you my first impression of the camp. It was Hai Linh Chau camp. It was the camp that was, it's beautiful when you look at from afar, you know, from Lantau, where I lived then. And in the morning, I would look through the mist, I would see Hai Linh Chau in front of me. Hai Linh Chau is a small camp. I think there wouldn't be more than 8,000 people. There would be just a few thousand people in there. And that's small, okay? In the biggest camp, Whitehead had like 80,000 or something. So like, and the first time I went in there was just memorable. I don't want to use too many negative words. I like to look back and think of it as a very memorable time, but it was tough. I mean, first of all, it wasn't called a camp. officially it was Hailing Chow Detention Center. So it's a detention center, it's not a camp. Number two, Hailing Chow was a prison. And so it was set up as a prison. So, barbed wire, really high up, and they split it into sections. It's called VOM. So every section, so it's just like you see how you know those army barracks, like the round thing like this, with no. It's kind of when it's hot, it's really hot. When it's cold, it's really cold.
Are they metal?
Not.
They have a
the shape, yeah. It's not metal. It's I mean it is metal, but it's like the iron.
Ribbed. It's ribbed, right?
Exactly.
Those are called Kwanzaa huts.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, and inside each of those huts, there'll be, I would say, 500 people.
Whoa.
Yeah, because what they do is this: they will have these 3
bunk beds.
But one on top of another.
Yeah, bunk beds, stacked beds, right?
But it's not just 2, but it's 3.
3.
So it's slightly bigger than a single bed, but it's slightly smaller than a double bed. And if you have a family, you get to be on the first floor. If you are single women, you're on the second floor. And if you're single guys, you're on the 3rd floor. And that's your family. Your family, I remember like I became close to this family, and I still keep in touch with the sons because they now in the US. And the eldest son, who was then like 8 or 9, he's now the director at SBTN role. I befriended their family because the father, Untold, was Pam's client, right? And so for lunch, I would go into the hut to have lunch with them, and they, food is given to them by the camp authorities. You it's like a container, like a plastic container, and they give you some rice and some fish or some meat or whatever, and the Vietnamese, they try to cook and make it better, So what does that mean? That means that they have to have ingredients, but they're not allowed to have ingredients. So people like me will then be asked to bring some ingredients in for them. So I was a hot guy at the time because I can bring stuff in for them. I would bring in, I don't know, like muối and tiêu and nước mắm and and dầu gió xanh,
the oil, tiger balm.
Yeah, the tiger balm. Yeah, I remember they love that because during the time that I was in Hong Kong, it was always summer in Australia, but it's winter in Hong Kong. And so it would be very cold, especially on the island. And there's no sort of like insulation at all. And you just lie on that bed. And the 2 parents and the 2 kids. It was, and then so that was a bit of a kind of like an eye opener for me because I came from Australia. Yes, my family didn't have a lot of money, but that's just another world. And then the one image that I will never forget is this: every Monday morning, all camp inmates have to get out of their VOM, and they have to sit on ngồi chầm hõm. They have to sit on they have to squat. That's right. Everyone, you can't stand, you can sit on your ass, you just have to squat. So that all the police would go search for illegal things that are being held in there, whether it's sugar or
contraband,
whatever that is not allowed in there. And you will see thousands of Vietnamese refugees, and the old and the young and the able and the not so able, all have to squat for hours waiting in the sun, in the blistering wind on Hailing Chow Island, waiting for the search to be concluded every Monday morning. And as a volunteer, we just had to wait. You know, we were in another second section. It's in the legal section where, you know, sort of like visitors come in and you know, so we just had to wait for that. And I will never ever forget the policeman, the Hong Kong policeman, didn't even care enough to treat the refugees with respect. They would have a rod, right? And they have to count each head. It's like, you know, it's like, because they're inmates, you know, you don't want people to escape, because there were a lot of people who couldn't hack the hardship, so they would try to escape from the camp. That's why these camps were on islands in detention centers, so they wouldn't escape from the camp. So they will be counted, you know, 1, 2, 3. And I still remember how they say it in Chinese. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And using the rock to hit it on the head of each of the inmates.
It's so dehumanizing.
Yeah, and I saw that every week.
Have somebody in the shoulder. Why do you have to hit him on the head?
The things we do, the things human beings do. So, you know, I remember on my Twitter a few weeks ago, I wrote a status and I said, and I posted a photo in Hailing Chow when I took a photo with all the kids. And I said, this picture was taken in 1992 in Hailing Chow camp. Little did we know that in less than 30 years, in less than 3 decades, the Hong Kongers are facing the same destiny. Because that's what they're doing too. They are being arrested right now by China, being persecuted for illegally attempting to leave Hong Kong, and they're being detained. So history repeats itself. So never underestimate both the power of the individual, but also how it's so easy for history to be repeated.
And I don't think it's ever going to stop, to be honest with you. I mean, I have a dark view about that. We just have to be vigilant, constantly vigilant, and try to do the right thing and speak up when we can, when it's appropriate. But it's a very, I think, human nature when we bond together as a government, or we see it happening daily in around us. Governments misbehaving, and it's a constant state of trying to be aware and balance what we as citizens are expected to do versus what government people, how they view their citizens. But going into back to the daily lives of the refugees, like, did they have security watching over them? I mean, what's stopping 8,000 people from rushing the gates and busting out? And, you know, were there police, armed guards? I mean,
they were certainly armed, but I mean, like, come on. I mean, these are just like, they're not criminals. These people are just refugees who wanted to have a better life. And if they wanted to have a better life, they have to line up. They have to wait for their turn to be interviewed. So no, of course there were fights, but there were fights between Vietnamese rather. So it was kind of sad. I don't think that the Hong Kong government intentionally did this, but they didn't, or at least the camp authorities, they couldn't see the tension between the North Vietnamese and the South Vietnamese. So they would house these North Vietnamese and South Vietnamese in the same camp.
Can we talk about that? We're talking about just, oh, is it a cultural thing or no? North and South?
It was cultural, but it was also political, because the South Vietnamese blamed the North Vietnamese for, you know, taking over South Vietnam, and then, you know,
now I understand.
them to flee Vietnam. And the North Vietnamese was saying, like, we are suffering too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but, you know, when you house people in these detention centers for years on end without enough resources and treating them utterly unfairly, legally speaking, not confined to any kind of international standards in terms of legal rights and representation, shit happens.
Yeah.
Tension rise. And so for that, yeah, that's right. The bet before I came. So I went to Hong Kong in December 1992. So Feb 1992, there was a fire called the Shek Kong. You should Google it. It's called Shek Kong, SHEKKONG, the Shek Kong fire. And that was another camp. The North Vietnamese and the South Vietnamese were housed in the same camp. So what happened was, one time, it was just before that, the South Vietnamese locked the North Vietnamese in one particular vom and set it on fire. Wow. And scores of people died, scores. And when I went to Hailing Chow, that was the camp for the Southerners. That was when they split. So, you know, the Northerners would go to Nay Koo Chow and High Island, and the Southerners would go to Hailing Chow. It's really sad. I think we should talk about it. But so much happened in the camp, and it's part of our legacy. It's part of our history, and we have to own up to it. Yeah.
I can't imagine what goes through your mind when you see the modern refugees coming out of Syria, coming out of those conflicts, and where they're going and the things that they go through. What do you think now when you look back and you think about their experience? And is anybody spearheading their sort of safety or human rights or anything like that?
Well, you know, back in 2010, 2009, 2010, I worked for, at the time I worked for International Lifeline Fund, the NGO that was founded and funded by Dan Wolf, right? And whom I befriended and became a good friend of. He sent me to Dadaab refugee camp, the biggest refugee camp in the world. And that was near the border of Somalia and Kenya. There were like 300,000 Somalian refugees, together with some other nationalities. I was in Hong Kong and I thought that was bad. And then I went to the Dadaab refugee camp and it became like, whoa. At times I felt hopeless. I mean, at times I felt like, giống như muối bỏ biển. It's like whatever you do, it's not good enough, right? And to this day, it's just not possible to solve it. We have now, I think, more than 20 million refugees around the world, you know, and that's just refugees. We're not talking about displaced people who face just as much hardship as refugees or stateless refugees. Now, the problems are humongous, whether it's in Syria, Afghanistan, the Rohingyas in Burma, or to this day, the Vietnamese refugees. We still have refugees from Vietnam, just not a lot, just not tens of thousands, but we have hundreds in Thailand. It's part of life. And each of us, I just think that what's the use? I usually just sit back and think, okay, what's the use of feeling lost or feeling hopeless? There's no use, you know, who cares? Who cares if Hoi Trin thinks it's sad? I think it's more important to start going out and learning as much as you can. Not just about the history of your community or of your nation or of humanity, but also about yourself. You know, I mean, I think you should just go out there and think, all right, now that I've learned this, what can I do? And I am one of the fervent believers in each of us can and should and must take civic action to make life and to make this world a better place. It sounds so bloody cliched, but it's something I really believe in.
Okay, let me ask you a follow-up question to that cliche or that whatever you think that in the last 30 years of the work that you've done, the progress you've seen, do you think the world is actually getting better, or do you actually think it's getting worse? And I mean that in terms of humanitarian. I mean the infrastructure that we have to resolve these things.
Neither. It's not better. It's not worse. It's just part of life.
Are we more equipped to handle the situations that we're in on a global scale? 300,000 people in a camp doesn't sound like it's getting better. It sounds like it's actually worse. And things, you said 29 million. That's a staggering statistic of people that are stateless and
yeah. It's it's in terms of communication, it's certainly better. I mean, I think back in the day, 30 years ago, you would have to kind of like try to stick your head out a bit more to understand the problems. Like I would have to go to Hong Kong to really see what was going on and did something about it. These days, you just Google it and all the information is there. But there's also, because of the internet, there's also more misinformation. And there's more fake news. There's more cynicism, as you see online, because it's so easy to go online and say whatever you want, and no one really cares. But at the same time, there's still good people in this world, and there's still more good people in this world than strong, powerful men who are so in need of exerting their power and their ideology. So yes, there are both benefits and costs as to the modern life that we lead right now. But I think that the problems are just the same. We will continue to have disparities between the rich and the poor. We will continue to have cultural differences, political differences, fundamental differences, religious differences that will lead to disparities and inequalities and wars and riots and I think that human beings will always strive to live in peaceful harmony. But as with human relations, I've learned that earnestness is just not enough. I mean, the only thing you can try, you just have to try your best. But this world, like how we started today, is a messy place. Yeah.
3 months in the camp in 92, the first 3 months goes by and you're heading back to Australia to pick up on your 4th year for law school. What goes on in your mind once you leave the camp? I mean, is there sort of like a withdrawal? You miss the people? What goes on?
Well, before I answer that question, what I want to sort of tell you right now and how I feel is that I feel that the pace as well as where we go with this interview is a bit slow and not as inspirational as it should be. But it's kind of like my first time to be reflective on this. So I hope that like, because I'm not trying to perform, I feel like over the past 20 years, whenever I give interviews regarding my work, I always have to kind of like be upbeat and
cheery,
fun and inspirational and cheering about it. And because I really wanted to solve the statelessness problem with the Vietnamese boat people. I really want to get the last boat people out, you know. This is kind of different. I do this more with a reflective nature of things. So I'm not as articulate, I'm not as decisive, and I hope it's okay, because
it's okay. But are you?
I don't know why, but I feel like with this format, yeah, with this format, this is the way I think I should be, because it's more real. It's more like a conversation between me and Ken, a friend, not like I'm giving an interview to anyone. And so it's more reflective. And it's a bit more down than up. Yeah. So anyway, so to answer your question.
Wait, are you?
No, I mean, I went back.
Are you okay? Are you comfortable with it? Are you okay with the format?
Yeah. I mean, I'm comfortable with it, but it's also new for me, because I'm usually a very positive and decisive and very kind of like, let's go and do it. You know, I'm that kind of guy. But just today, I felt that because there's no time limit, and because you ask all these questions that no one really asked me before, like, oh, you know, my first impression at the camp when I first met them, I'm like, that was such a long time ago, you know. So I haven't really shared this with anyone publicly.
Well, you know, when I look at you, right, 20 years into this, when I look at you every time or see you on stage or screen, I know that there's so much that you've seen that I wonder all the time if anybody's ever asked you these questions. Fuck that. I don't even think about that. I actually think in my own head, what did he see in that first glimpse of going from Australia to the camp? Like, I'm just a curious person, and I'm so inquisitive about like what you really felt, because what you see 15, 20 years later, you in the entertainment business or whatnot, it's a totally different persona. And I want to see and hear what that raw kind of like that emotion was, you know. And I don't even feel like I'm even scratching the surface right now, to be honest with you. I feel like I'm just barely peeling back like a paint layer, you know. I want to really hear the things that I've heard from my families in the camp, but I want to hear it through somebody like you who was in and out of that camp and got to go back to, you know, like an Australian sort of like middle class, you know, way of living, and you went back and forth for so many years. And I want to know how it changed and how the life in the camp sort of progressed. If we don't have enough time to do it in this session, I hope one day that we get to. And I know that there's a lot of things that, you know, you and I had discussed that we're going to discuss on this shot here. But these are things that, you know, the more, I always talk about this with guests, the more granular and the more molecular down to the details that I can get. And it's just a selfish thing for me. It just satisfies that sort of curiosity. And I'm like, I never get a chance to talk to you about this. We party, we do things, and we just don't have a chance to really reflect on the things that have led you to where you are today. So I appreciate you being open and allowing me to ask you these things. And stop me if you ever get uncomfortable. Or...
and you know, thanks for spending your time with me, because, you know, we all live on borrowed time, right? So yeah, it's no, thank you. Going back to Melbourne was great. I started appreciating more things than before I went to Hong Kong. So I had a pretty interesting time growing up. I mean, like from age of 5, when the Vietnam War ended, and then 77 when we went to the remote island, and then when it was 12, and I went back to Saigon, and then I was 15 when I went to Australia, 14 turning 15 when I went to Australia, and then I went to Hong Kong at the age of 22, and I thought I've seen it all, but no, I mean, like I remember I went back to, I would always go back. I would stay for as long as I could in Hong Kong, until like I would just even miss the first week of uni, because the first week of uni is kind of like nothing, it's just like hello and whatever, you know. So I would usually just miss the first week because I loved Hong Kong and the work that I was doing, and spend time with Pam. Seriously, it was more spending time with Pam and other people in her orbit did wonders to my mind. And so when you asked me that question, the first image that popped in my head was the green lawn, the vast green lawn of Melbourne University. So Melbourne University, you know, the university where I did my law degree and my arts degree, is one of the biggest and most well-known and prestigious universities in Australia. It's either the second oldest or the oldest law school. And it's got a beautiful facade, like it's a all stone and cone and beautiful, vast green grass everywhere, and which is the total opposite of the camp. Every day I would go to the camp and there's no trees, that's just barbed wire, there's just these huts with thousands of refugees teeming, and it's crazy, you know. It's tensions rose and people cry and argue and fight, and it's almost like human beings compressed place, acting out of their worst instincts. And then I take a flight, and then, you know, I go back to Australia. I would land on a Saturday or Sunday, and I go to school on a Monday. And I go in, and everyone is just relaxed, and, you know, my guy friends would just update me on their latest, I don't know, girl maneuverings, and mom would be cooking great meals, and on that lawn, I would always lie down and look at the sky and lie down on the grass and feel the fresh air, and I felt wonderful. I felt like, oh my God, thank God I'm here, you know? Yeah. So I got more thankful, I guess, for what I had. I appreciated that I had hot and cold water, because you kind of like take it for granted that, like, of course you're gonna have hot and cold water, but no, not in Hong Kong, not in the camp, not when you have to go to the toilet and you have to use the camp toilet, which is like you go to the toilet and they just, you know, like there's not even doors, there's no doors, okay? So like they would have these barriers. There'll be like 20 of them, like rows and rows of not even toilet seat. You just sit on there, and there's this like, I don't even know how to describe it.
Porcelain hole in the
toilet. There's not even a hole. It's like
wow.
A cement thing. How can I?
It's like
it's like a trench. It's like a cement trench, yeah. Right? A trench. And then, but then they have these barriers put up, cement barriers. And then you just sit there and you just do your thing into the trench. And then, you know, people talk and they walk back and forth. And like, seriously, even though I grew up in poverty Vietnam, I mean, I did not grow up in, that was a lot, you know, and you know, I was in prison when I was 9 years old, but I was so young, I don't remember any of it. But with this, I was 22 years old. I already had Australia, you know, as my home country. And then I remember there were times when I said, no, I'm not going to go to the toilet. I just cannot. I'm like, I can't do this. I can't do it with like 100 men in there talking as if like, you know, it's like public shit. So no, I couldn't do it. So then I would have these kind of like, I would smile and laugh with myself whenever I just sit in the toilet back at home, like, oh, this is so good. I can just be by myself, you know, taking a dump. So yeah, I think that those memories that I will never ever forget. I got more, you know, of course I became more aware of our community, especially our legacy. Not just the legacy of the Vietnam War. I always think of the refugees as the remnants of our past. For many people, especially people in the West, the Vietnam War ended, and therefore their involvement with Vietnam ended. So it ended in 1975. But for millions of Vietnamese, especially our parents, the war did not end in 1975. The war ended, but the suffering started, especially for South Vietnamese. And not just loss of home, but loss of land, loss of culture, loss of language. I started to begin to understand my parents' both happiness and frustrations at life. That was the first time, and I kind of really understood why, and why it's so difficult for that generation to move on. I often think you can only move on if you can make peace with the past. But what if you still have to live with the past, and you can't let it go because it's still there tormenting you? You know, how can you let it go? The suffering continues. You know, thousands and thousands of families got separated. So many died on the high sea. How can you ever forget that? My youngest brother died in the sort of aftermath of the war, and because of a lack of medication. I mean, so how can my mom ever forget that? I mean, I don't think she will ever. But each of us has to move on, and for me, I just felt I was lucky because I didn't have that baggage of the past, but I was able to look into it, so. It's good for me to be just an observer, you know. I kind of I stepped into the past, like Amanda Gorman said in her beautiful poem, The Hill We Climb. I managed to step into the past and looked at it. But I wasn't part of the past because I didn't have to go through that. I didn't have to go through the screening process. I didn't have to, because my future was already secured in Australia, you know, at a young age, but not through any of my own doing, like mom and dad did it. I just followed them. So I think that our generation is lucky in that sense, to be able to feel for them, but not necessarily to feel like them.
But
I feel for my parents, but I don't feel like them.
There's a conundrum here about all that I feel that we go through a lot. I go through this problem where, okay, so you have a whole generation of men that were incarcerated in re-education camps and died. I mean, I have a lot on my family side, but I'm not them. That's a problem. Here's a big problem that I have to reconcile with all the time. And thankfully, my father was part of that generation, and he, you know, went through a lot of the issues of what those men went through, and he could share the pain. But he always said to me, he said, look, and he didn't say it in very many words, but he said, you know, that's sort of his history. You have a new history. You have to kind of shape and form what happens, but don't really sort of pay much attention to it. And I don't know for good or for bad, but what we are living through as I'm 45 and I have to look at the pain that was sustained in that first generation. And then now, because of whatever that they went through today, I'm able to live a better life for sure. But at the same time, it's hard for me to kind of reconcile with their pain, and for me to be expected to understand their political sort of viewpoints, because this is not things that I share. And do I have a right to have my own thoughts and feelings separate of the community that I grew up in and have supported me? And so this is a lifelong question that my generation, you know, there's a lot going on in Vietnam right now that business-wise, a lot of exciting things that I want to be a part of. I want to be a part of that life. My brother lives there for almost 20 years now. He was basically, under 1 year old when he came to America, and he lives in Vietnam for the last 20 years. We are neither here nor there. We're kind of a place where it's very privileged to not have to be attached to any sort of single ideology. But my question constantly is, how do we sort of come together as a community of people that share this word Vietnam, share this identity of being Vietnamese? Do we need to come together? Is there a reason that we should all think and strive for the same thing?
Back to you before you did the pause where you talked about you and your brother and your parents and how there seems to be a gap, right? Yes, and the gap would be bigger for you guys as well, because I think that you belong to more like the second generation. Were you born in the US?
I was born in the US.
Yeah. So see, I mean, so you didn't have all those years that I had growing up in Vietnam, and understanding that part of history because I've lived in it. The culture and the way of thinking and the way of life and what parents expected of their children and vice versa. So I had half of that. I didn't have the whole thing. I had half of it. I had a glimpse of it. And then I went to Australia, and then I had the culture that you immersed yourself in the day you were born. So I have one foot in the Vietnamese culture and another foot in the Western culture. So therefore that gap for me, I guess, is smaller, right?
Right.
I'm more like the 1.5. I'm not the one. I'm not. Right? That's number one. 1.5. And then I was even more lucky than you guys, than other people in my generation. Was that I actually got to go to the camps, and I actually got to understand the frustrations and the losses and the fears of the older generation. Because we have to admit, the boat people exodus is the first generation's problem, not second generation problem. Yet I am known for the guy who has. So I'm 1.5, but I'm one of the leading forces of the first generations, right? So therefore, I have more appreciation for the past, but also understand where you guys coming from, because I had the same kind of upbringing in education. So the same intellect, the same way of life of looking forward. So yeah, I mean, it boils down to, like we said at first, opportunities and how fortunate one's life would be beyond one's control. I told you about how I met up with Pam Baker and how I got to go to Hong Kong. It wasn't out of my own ability. I mean, I wrote a letter and then I picked it up, and then I managed to go to Hong Kong and met up with one of the most wonderful human beings who became my mentor by default. And you gotta have luck for that. I mean, you can't plan for that. Your parents can't plan for that, and money won't be able to give you any of that. So no, it was so wonderful that I had such an experience at such a young age. Yeah.
But today we're dealing with something that is, I don't know if it's predictable or not, but we're dealing with this sort of vast difference in where a second generation person like me, I just don't see it the same way as the first generation. I just don't see the representation in the flags the same. I don't see the political discourse being the same. I have a deep relationship with people in Vietnam, doing business in Vietnam. I have a deep relationship with people in Orange County that I work with on both sides of the aisle. And I cringe, and I'm so sad sometimes when I think about the sort of the divisive nature that we find ourselves in this community. It's so messy, but I want to find a way where we can get to some common ground. And what does it mean to be Vietnamese? What does it mean to be Vietnamese to you now? What does that word?
Well, first of all, I hope that you look at the divisiveness and the gap not as something that is intrinsically Vietnamese, but it's intrinsically human, and more importantly, it is grounded in a very violent past of our history. Vietnam went through 100 years of colonialism, right? A lot of unjust things happened then. Then Vietnam went through a civil war, right? For 20 years, from 1954. I mean, it was so bad, the country was divided. I mean, not a lot of countries were divided in this world. Vietnam was one of the few. So we went through a lot. Our people went through a lot. And you can't expect peace to just take place and then there's no more division. Divisions take generations to really be understood and to be forgiven by both sides. You look at the civil war in the US right now. Is there still division? Yes.
Still almost.
Why is the Confederate flag still there? So is there division? Yes. But it's not intrinsically American.
Right, makes sense.
That we have such division. It stemmed from the past. And therefore, what we need to do is each of us must step into it to repair it. That's each of our responsibility as a concerned citizen. Yeah, so that's the one comment I want to make. Don't feel despair or hopeless, and don't think of it as something that is intrinsically Vietnamese. That is something that I want to let the young know. You know, you can't just say, oh, let's forgive and forget. Well, you know, none of us had to go through what they had to go through. Yeah. You know, having said that, it's true that people of either my generation or your generation or my children's generation cannot also live in the present, but being chained to the past. We have to break it free. Each of us first will define what a Vietnamese is in our own state of mind, you know. Being a Vietnamese to me might be different from yours, but who says that mine is better than yours or worse? And therefore your definition of how to be a Vietnamese in the 21st century is different also from a Vietnamese living in Vietnam. And it's also different from a Vietnamese living in Australia. I mean, I have had the opportunities to work and perform, so both in the human rights arena as well as in the entertainment arena, to come across so many segments of Vietnamese society, whether in Vietnam or abroad, you know, whether as a human rights lawyer or as a corporate lawyer. I like to think that I've seen a bit. And there is a sense of Vietnamese-ness in each of us, but there's also differences. Vietnamese in France are very different from Vietnamese in Australia, and very different from Vietnamese in Vietnam, regardless of ideology. You know, I'm not talking about even about ideology, you know, I'm just talking about cultural identification. Yeah.
What made you're an American citizen now, right?
Yes, I am a Vietnamese citizen by birth, Australian citizen by default, and American by choice.
Can we talk about that?
Sure.
Why America? Why do you live here, and why become a US citizen?
that's kind of just by default too. I mean, like, you know, I grew up in Australia, and you know, in Australia we grow up not thinking of the US as like the place to go to. Yeah, sorry to upset some of the American content people there, but growing up in Australia means looking up maybe to England and its glorious past as the place where you want to get further study. So that's why I went to England to do my master's instead of the US. Many of us would go to Europe to, you know, to work for a few years. America to us is a bit too cowboy, a bit too loud. Even though we always recognize that, you know, America is the place where it matters, you know. Whatever America does, everyone knows, everyone cares.
I would like to ask you a very superficial question. Growing up, whenever Americans, you know, my generation, when we heard British accents or Australian accents, we just get turned on. It's just so special. And for me, especially growing up, hearing Aussie accent, you know, when there were girls that would come from Australia that I would meet, it would be a totally different experience, right?
Right.
Do you in Australia hear American accents and feel a certain way?
No, because all our entertainment is American entertainment. So we used to it already. I mean, like, you know, I watched Growing Pains when I was growing up. I remember I loved watching Growing Pains with Kirk Cameron. I love watching 90210, Beverly.
Yeah.
I love watching Melrose Plays. So culturally speaking, we grew up on American entertainment, not British. Not so much British.
It wasn't exotic or didn't feel, you know.
No, it felt like us, but it felt a bit American. You know, American is loud, is cowboy, is it's almost like, you know, you guys always give yourself a God-given right to tell others
interesting
what's good. And when you grow up in places like Australia, Australia is more, they're quite anti-establishment. Australians, I mean, if you understand about Australia's past, it's a land of built by convicts, you know, who hate the establishment. And there's a tall man syndrome, right? They don't like people who are too well known, too loud, too successful, too rich, you know, they just like the average guy. That's just I'm generalizing, but they pride themselves on being the fed income country. You know, everything is fair for or the blokes are the same. You know, like so yeah. No, but I became an American citizen because I happened to fall in love with my then first big love of my life that I wanted to be married to, and so because I married her, and there was no way. I mean, I was in the Philippines, working and living full time in the Philippines, helping the refugees, and there was no way that her name is Nguyen, right? And so there was no way that Nguyen would move to the Philippines and live with me. So, and
Can I stop real quick. All right, we're ready.
Well, I didn't plan to fall in love and to get married. So I was a very happy-go-lucky guy. I was 32 when I came to the US. So I went to England to do my master's in 2001. So I was 31. And after I finished my master's, I moved to the States and I started lobbying in DC for the stateless refugees at the time I was representing. So that's how I got to know Nguyen. But I didn't plan to marry. But you know,
life happens.
Things happen. And you don't plan. See, you don't plan these things. So for all my life, I never sort of even gave it a second thought that I would go to the US and live. But here I am. It's because of a girl.
Let's talk about that. That's a second chapter in your life, right? I mean, the next chapter is so you're in DC, you're lobbying. You get into the entertainment business. How did you?
Only after I got married. So I got and this is where I think serendipity sort of like came into me. I met Nguyen as I was lobbying, and as the US changed its policy in 2004, that was also when I decided to get married. So I moved to the States just like the refugees, because by 2005, all the refugees got resettled. I sort of ran out of clients.
Right.
And so I said, okay, then by that time I moved with the refugees to the States. They came here as refugees, but I came here as the husband of a US citizen. And so, yeah. Yeah. And then when I came here, and I remember, like, I went to, so I met Nam Lop and Antukho back in the camp in the Philippines. So, these Vietnamese sort of community leaders and celebrities, they would go to the camps to visit the refugees, and I perform for free or whatever. So that's how I met up with them. So when I came here, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went to Asia Entertainment. But the year before, hang on. So the year before that, I was given, because of the work I've done, I've been giving awards here and there, blah, blah, blah. And so like the community gave me an award, and it was presented on Asia.
Asia, just to specify, it's a label.
Asia Entertainment, right. So there's two big entertainment, basically, productions in our community. There's Twinga and there's Asia. And they come out with these really kind of a special
variety show,
video DVDs collections. It's like a variety show, but only for DVD collections.
Right.
And so for these events, and as if like life would have it, it was done at the Kodak Theater, I remember, in Hollywood. And, here I am, just like a lawyer, trying to do his bit, and just falling in love with, I would say, a quite well-known figure in our community, and not just in the entertainment industry, but with a family background like that. And then Asia kind of like gave me an award at the Kodak Theater.
It all fell in place.
Life has been giving me a lot of chances, and has given me so many opportunities that an average guy from a working class family would never see the light of day. That's how I would put it.
Wait, so this was before or after you did Quaz film?
This is way before. I did Quaz film back in 2008 when I was already in Vietnam, but this was in 2004.
Okay.
When I just got married to Nguyen, and I came here, and thanks to the award that I was given, I met up with Nam Lop and Antukho, and I say, hey, I'm here now. Is anything for me to do? And Antukho looked at me and said, no, why don't you be a host, an MC? I think you can
pull it off.
Stage fright. And it's true. I do have stage fright, but not usually, because of my work in the camps, and I had to deal with life and death issues and the future of thousands of people. So when I go on stage and present a song, at the back of my mind, I always thought, well, if if I do something wrong, I mean, chẳng chết thằng Tây nào, you know,
Right.
no one is gonna, no one is gonna end up kind of like suffer because of my failure. So, so that's how I got the job. I mean, I was so lucky. Like a lot of, I think, like you can see that for Vietnamese hosts and MCs, right? They all belong to our parents' generation. I'm like the only guy in our generation that gets to be in that position. So I'm very fortunate to be given such a chance, to be given kind of like brotherly advices by anh Nam Lộc, by anh Nguyen, by Nguyen, by they all my predecessors, right? They all my like my anh Nguyen is like my dad's age, and Nam Lộc is like 2 years younger than my mom, you know. So and I call them anh, I call them brother, which is not even like in our culture. It's very important for the xưng hô, for the name that you call each other, right? I mean, when say bác or chú, I mean, yes, you have more respect for them, but you don't have as much of a connection with them.
Right.
Correct? Whereas I do have a connection with them because I call them anh.
Right.
Anh Nam Lộc, anh Nguyen, chị Lệ Thu, chị Khánh Ly, you know, so like then they would share with me stories that you wouldn't otherwise hear because I'm đàn em.
Yeah. The hierarchical wall is broken now. And
yeah. So and there aren't that many young guys of my generation that would be in that position.
Correct. Would have that access. Yeah.
Right. And because of my work with Vietnamese refugees, I'm kind of like their of the children's generation, and yet I have done stuff that they respect because it's their problem. It's not our problem, right? And yet I did it. So I get more credit than I deserve.
Thanks.
Yeah. So thanks to that, I got exposed to a lot of ideas, a lot of the dynamics that you wouldn't otherwise hear it, whether on TV or in personal relationships.
Now, there has to be a sort of big similarities and big differences of the two ways of life, right? You're doing humanitarian work and you're doing showbiz. Those two lives can be very different. I think there's
totally different.
They're totally different, but at the same time, there's got to be a lot of similarities. And I think one of the similarities I think about is you have to publicize whether you're in showbiz or humanitarian work. You have to really get out there and let the world know what the issues are, right? But on the flip side of it, when you're doing showbiz and you kind of announce and you're kind of working as an MC, the stakes are not as big as working for stateless refugees. So how did you kind of mitigate that sort of like difference in your brain? Because it's kind of silly if you think about it. One's like life and death, the other is just like making people at home entertained.
I haven't really thought of how I manage it. I kind of just wing it, like it's not as if like I was given a choice.
Yeah.
And it's not as if like I went through any school. I mean, I always appreciate the fact that I was given such a chance. I was 34, old enough in the West, but not old enough in our culture to be on stage, to guide people and to tell people things. I guess I was always mindful of that, mindful of the fact that I was given such a choice, like access to that platform. Also because the refugee human rights work is something that I'm very passionate about. I mean, since I was still in law school, so it never left me. So then I thought of entertainment as just another platform for me to advocate for what I believe in. I mean, obviously on stage, I couldn't say everything about refugee and human rights, but off stage and then in doing my advocacy work for refugees, the name helped. The fact that they could just instantly recognize my name helped. It is sometimes unfortunate that most people know me through my MCing work, even though I have to put my hand on my heart and say, I put maybe a quarter of my efforts into the MCing work, and most of my efforts are spent on the human rights work and on the refugee work. But that's okay. You know, the entertainment work, it paid for some bills, and it has certainly helped with my refugee work. It has helped. I think that name recognition is important for community work. Negatively, positively, I mean, just name recognition is better than no name recognition.
Yeah, branding is important.
Yeah, it's just a brand. And the last but not least is the fact that people tend to overlook, they try to simplify issues and solutions by attaching one's name or one's legacy to one problem. And they all say, oh, yeah, Trịnh Hội did it. But the truth of the matter is, I didn't do it. I mean, I did it with others. But so many people helped make it happen. I mean, I happened to be the leader. I happened to lead the campaign to solve the last Vietnamese boat people crisis in the Philippines and then later in Thailand. But by no means I was the only one. So I'm very mindful of that. And I'm mindful of the fact that my voice got amplified by many others, whether it is in Australia or in the US or Canada. You know, Bak Khoa, for example, and Nam Lộc helped me with advocacy work in the US. But then there are people who you don't know, but you know, there's bác sĩ Nguyen and Đoàn Việt Trung, Voice Australia, that helps me with my work in Australia. And then, you know, when I go to Germany and I have German Vietnamese friends who helped me, and I go to Canada and I have tiến sĩ Lê Duy Cấn, and I have Voice Canada, I have Đỗ Kỳ Anh, I have Tuấn. I mean, I can give you all these names that have walked with me along the way to achieve what we managed to achieve, to solve to really close the last chapter of the Vietnamese boat people. So yeah, I mean, yes, to answer your question, I'm very thankful that I've got both platforms. And I'm very thankful that I have been given that unique opportunity to see it from all sides and to be able to be like the middleman.
Yeah.
To pull everyone around. Yeah.
What's next?
I would be the middleman, really.
Yeah. You're still doing the showbiz work, but what's next? What's the next chapter like?
Man, I mean, that's a very simple question, but what's next post-pandemic? I think a lot of us will have or have had the opportunity to reflect over the past year, and many of us, I feel, will go out there and try to live life as meaningfully as possible and not to take things for granted. And I'm glad. In many ways, I'm glad that I've gone through what I've gone through over this past 12 months to be where I am today. What do I want to do? I would say, I feel partly I've done enough community work. I honestly feel that I've done enough. For some reason, I always felt like I have had so much that I should give, and maybe, you know, my mom and dad wouldn't mind me being able to live near them and just take mom out shopping or help around the house more, because I haven't done that at all. I'm the only son in the family, the eldest grandson, cháu đích tôn. On my dad's side and my mom's side, I'm the only grandson. So, you know, if for our culture, you know, familial duty is quite important, and I haven't done any of that. And so I do feel a bit guilty. I have a 10-year-old son, and then I also have 2 stepdaughters, and I haven't really been around full time for them. And so I do want to spend more time with them in the next, I would say, 5 to 10 years, which means that I will not work and live overseas like I did before. I would like to live here in the US and to, number one, help take care of my family more. That's pretty much number one. I think that I've been a bit slack in that regard with my parents, with my daughters and son, and I want to spend more time with them, especially for my son, because he's 10 now. I mean, maybe when he was 2 or 3 or 4, you know, he's too young. But now I want to be a constant presence in his life. So that's for in the private sphere. In the public sphere, I mean, I still have my, you know, radio and TV gig on Vietface TV. What I really want to do is to work with the younger generation of Vietnamese American. Given what happened at Capitol Hill on January 6th, I feel more attached to and closer to America. I have never felt as American as I am now. You know, I grew up Vietnamese and then thinking I'm Vietnamese Australian, and for the longest time, even during my first marriage, I felt that I don't have to be an American. But then I became an American because I thought, okay, you know, it's going to make my life easier here. I want to vote and all that. But I never felt so connected to America until the event at Capitol Hill. I felt that this country also needs more voices from people like us, you know, the voices of immigrants. The US is going through changes as well, generational changes, technological changes. And Vietnamese Americans, the second generation is growing and is starting to have a voice. You know, over the past, I would say, 45 years since the end of the Vietnam War, our parents had a voice in our community, whether it's in Australia here. We pretty much had no voice. And I think that it's high time that our generation should raise our voice and say out loud what we think the future should be. I feel strongly about it. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but I will probably use the platform I already have to amplify the younger voices of our generation and our children's generation, because they deserve it.
Beautiful. I think I tell everybody this: you should start a podcast. Do it. And because if there's more people like me doing this, people like you, and then you encourage your group and your circle, we can amplify the message. There needs to be more people doing long form podcasts so we can cast a wider net, whether it's in Vietnamese or English. It's important. And so I beg you, and I really come to you today to create that. And it's doesn't take much to put that on. And you know, you are so connected with so many different perspectives in the community, and you can really affect change. And really, you can do it exactly what you're doing right now. Sit in your living room and you get bak kwa on and you can go deep with bakwa. And if both of us are doing bakwa, you have a third, fourth person that does bakwa. Pretty soon the community will know what bakwa does, and 20, 30 other guests that we do that are in the same vein, and it amplifies our voice. And I know this because I've studied this form for the last 10 years, and I've seen the early guys doing it. They've begged their friends to do it, the people that are able to do it, who are articulate, who are thoughtful, to do something like this. And I hope that today this experience will encourage you to flip the camera on and just hit record. It's fairly simple. And we, as a group of people that want to explore what being Vietnamese is today, and the future of where we're going, this is an important platform to do. I hope you just consider what I'm saying.
I am seriously considering it, but I probably would not do it in English. I probably do it in Vietnamese, because I still think that our community, the Vietnamese speaking community, deserve to hear facts than fiction. They deserve to hear balanced views than extremist views, and they deserve to hear it in Vietnamese. I think one of the failures of our community is that there's such a huge language barrier. Yeah.
I would like for us to do another one, what we just did in Vietnamese as well. It'll probably be a little different, but I would love to do, because I think with our language in Vietnamese, it'll steer the topics differently too. The vibe, it's like two musicians getting in a room, and we switch up on instruments basically, and I think the music will become a different song, if you will. Yeah, a few more weeks. Now let's talk about some fun stuff.
What sort of fun?
Olympic torch. Tell me about that.
What do I have to tell you about it? I mean, like, I don't even know how I got. I don't know how I got voted. It's just one day.
Yeah. What was the process?
I have no idea. It's just like one day I was in the Philippines, because I was working in the Philippines, right? When the Sydney Olympics 2000 was on. So there was like, I think a few months before that. And I was, hang on. That's right, Sydney 2000, so 1999. Hang on, so yeah. So I just returned to Australia, so I was so lucky. So after 2 years in the Philippines, so from 97, so I went to Hong Kong 92 to 97, 5 consecutive summers, right? And then in 1995, when I graduated from law, I did my internship, and then I worked at Baker McKenzie Sydney office. And Baker McKenzie at the time was one of the largest law firms in the world. And I had a great time there, in my mid-20s, working in Sydney. And then I got employed by another law firm, and I was sent to Vietnam, and I was in Vietnam in 96 and 97. I got kicked out of Vietnam in 97, went to the Philippines. So from 97 to 99, I was in the Philippines, enjoying life and working on my cases. And 99 was when I started becoming an advocate rather than just a lawyer, because at the time I realized that being a lawyer was just not good enough. Being a lawyer means you have to follow the law. And after 2 years of following the law, everyone who followed the law got resettled, but then the law at the time didn't allow others to be resettled because they were not deemed to be eligible refugees. That's when advocacy started kind of like being my tool going forward, rather than being a lawyer. So I went back to Australia in 1999. And I really got lucky, and I got employed by a federal court judge, the only female federal court judge at the time, Justice Susan Kenny. I was her associate, so I was clerking for her, and it was like, it was again, I don't know, it's like an accolade, it's like wow, I got to be an associate to a federal court judge, a female judge, you know, and so I was very lucky. So in 1999, I was working with, but then one day I just got a letter in the mailbox saying that like, I just got selected as a torchbearer for the 2000 Sydney Olympics. So I have no idea, seriously, up to this day, I have no idea how I got selected. I have no idea how I got, they just told me I got selected.
You never asked like the governing body or the person that reached out,
No.
managing some?
No, I mean, like, there were hundreds of people like me, and it was rare for an immigrant, a refugee, who like, I wasn't Ian Thorpe, you know, because Ian Thorpe was flying, was the last torchbearer. I was the one along the way, but I was nowhere near. I just thought it was a novelty, and it came down to probably one of the politicians that I was trying to lobby to help help with my advocacy campaign to let some stateless refugees enter Australia. You know, at the time I was lobbying a lot. Like, yes, I had my full-time job as an associate, but on the side, I always have like 2 or 3 things doing at the same time. So on the side, I was lobbying, and so I would meet up with this senator and that congressman, and you know, in Australia we call member of parliament. Who knows? Who knows? Who knows how I got it? But yeah, or maybe just from some of the awards I won. I don't know. So
What about?
But it was fun. I had to get up at bloody 6 or 6 in the morning, because people would line up, right? So you there were many people that, because the torch had to be carried around Australia. Wow. to Sydney, and my hometown was Melbourne, which is the nearest big city near Sydney, right? So there's Sydney and Melbourne on the sort of eastern side, and then there's Brisbane, there's Adelaide, Perth. They're all really far. So mine was like the closest to Sydney. So before it got to the Olympic Stadium. So I got up at, I don't know, 6 in the morning, run for about, I don't know, 1 kilometer. And I got to keep the torch, but it's not the same torch. Like, everyone, you get to keep the torch.
Wow.
You get to keep the torch because you give the flame to the next torch, right? So you get to keep the torch, but my mom had to, I didn't want to keep the torch, but my mom paid something like $100 to keep the torch. So we still have the torch right now. Wow, with the Olympic flame lit. That was fun. Yeah.
What about your fellowship at Stanford? That was just recent, right?
3 years ago, 2017.
What prompted it? Yeah. What prompted it? And what was it about?
Oh, no, that's different. I studied law. I never studied political science. But over the past 10 years, because of my human rights work, I really wanted to understand political science and politics. I never learned politics. So Stanford has a pretty good summer fellowship program. It's called, very prestigious. It's called the Draver Hills Summer Fellowship. They pay for everything. I mean, like, yeah, you don't have to pay for anything. And you taught by, you know, the greatest minds on democracy. It would be like Larry Diamond and Francis Fukuyama and Mike McFaul, the former ambassador to Russia, Condoleezza Rice, you know, like the biggest names.
Yeah.
And I just really wanted to do it. Every summer, I want to do something extra, you know, instead of taking a holiday. You know, 1 year I went to Bhutan to become a monk, and the next year I wanted to do a summer clerkship. So I think 2016 or 2015 was when I went to Bhutan. 2016 was when I did the Harvard online course. 2017 I did the Stanford thing, you know. So it stems from also my youth. Like, every summer, whether I was in school or I was at work, I wanted to take like that 1 month off or 2 months off or 3 months off to do something that I really want to do, like for me. Yeah. And most of the time it's just to study. When I was young, I was studying, so then I would be working during my summer. And then when I'm old enough, I would be working, but I would be studying in the summer. So yeah.
Okay, Bhutan. What led to that experience?
A number of reasons. The main reason was because, I just had to keep a promise to Buddha.
Okay, well, what exactly? Tell me about it. What exactly did you do? Because I've read about it, but tell me about it. What exactly led?
I just became a monk for a month.
Okay, you're a monk,
like a real Buddhist monk.
right? Shave your head, go through the whole.
Yeah, you shave your head, you shave your eyebrows. You have to keep 227 rules that the monk has to keep. I did it because the main reason was because of the refugees. So the boat people caseload in Thailand was the last caseload, and it was just really difficult because the refugees had been there for nearly 3 decades, and it was just a long fight. So I started lobbying in 2006, but we didn't get the change of policy into 2013. So it's like it took 7 years to advocate for the change in policy. So Canada decided to take about 108 of them to Canada for resettlement. And during the time that I was doing it, it was difficult because I had to change the law. And then once the law changed, we had to find sponsorship for them for the refugees. And I had to find sponsorship for them. We also had to pay for all the fees. So we had to raise enough funds for it. And in the middle of this process, in Bangkok, there was a coup. Like 2016, there was just a coup. So suddenly there was even no government, no Thai government to work with. I remember so we promised Canada that they will give us the visa for the refugees, but we have to get the exit permit from Thailand. Because all these are stateless refugees, okay? So they're not registered by anyone. They're just stateless. So then, in the end, there was no immigration minister to go to because there was no immigration minister. So I have a wonderful Thai woman whom I call mom, who's like my godmom, she loves me. And she happens to be the wife of a general. And so she took me to see one of the generals who then was the acting minister for immigration. So it was really difficult in that regard, not just in terms of lobbying the resettlement country, Canada, but it was difficult to convince Thailand to let them go. Because Thailand doesn't want to be a magnet for illegal immigrants. So it was so difficult. And one day, we couldn't even get the refugees to go to Bangkok for an interview at the embassy of Canada. And that's just like, oh my God, I've done all that and now they can't even go to Bangkok for the interview because there's curfews. And because they are stateless Vietnamese, they don't have any papers. So they live in all the provinces and there will be all these checkpoints that they can't get to Bangkok. They can't physically get to Bangkok because they don't have any papers. If they go to Bangkok, they'll be arrested and they will never get to the embassy. So in the middle of all that, I kind of like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? So I went to a temple. The things we do. So I went to a Buddhist temple. I'm Buddhist by default also because my family are Buddhist. So I went to a Buddhist temple, and in our culture, if you really want something, you pray that you please give it to you, and then you're gonna shave your head as a thank you token. Xuống tóc tạ ơn. So it's very cultural, but it's also very Buddhist.
Ritual, yeah.
Yeah. So then I just went to that particular temple and I said, please let me close the last chapter of the Vietnamese boat people, please. And I'll shave my head. And, you know, like, seriously, like, as a TV host, I mean, you shave your head and you think, I mean, you're done. I mean, that's forget about your career then. But it's something that I really wanted to do. And so I got it. So when the last, not the last actually, pretty much the last flight, we had some remaining cases that had medical issues and it took about a year for them to go, but it was the last big flight. So I took about, I think, I can't remember, like 20 or 30 stateless Vietnamese refugees to Canada. And that was the last flight for the boat people exodus. And I did that. And then I returned to Thailand and I shaved my head and I became a monk for a month. Just to.
Did you know the monastery ahead of time? And did you have like a connection?
Okay, so yes. So it's a bit complicated. I went to this, it's called Wat Tri Met. Tri Met means three monks. It's a very well-known temple in Bangkok. It's the one that with the golden Buddha statue. And that's where the refugees were telling me, because they all really know Thai culture much more than me, because they have been living in Thailand for about 30 years. So they told me that, you know, if you really want something, not for yourself, but really something that you do, not to get more money or something, but just to succeed, then you go to that temple. So yes, I knew that temple. So that's where I went to do the prayer. Now, during that time when I did the prayer, sort of, I knew that I wanted to do it, but I didn't know where I would do it, right? I mean, when you become a monk, you can do it anywhere, as long as it's a temple. Okay, so then I have a friend, and he happens to be the king of Bhutan now, okay? But he was not the king when I was a friend of his. And
how did he just happen to be the king of Bhutan? Like, where?
Like, because he was my Oxford classmate. We were at the same college and same year. So anyway, so I think around 2015, 2016, his name is Jigme, but you know, I call him His Royal Highness, HM, His Majesty. So HM was visiting Bangkok, and I was working and, you know, living in Bangkok. So I would meet up with him. I think that at the time he just brought his wife over as well to Bangkok, and he would meet with friends of his, right? So one night I met up with him in Bangkok, and I was telling him about, like, you know, how I was about to finish my last boat people exodus. I was so happy. I'm going to close out this chapter. I'm going to become a monk for a month in Thailand. And he looked at me and said, "Hoi, come to Bhutan." And I'm like, oh, I would love to go to Bhutan. And he said, "I'm going to set it all up." So, you know, if you had the king of Bhutan as your friend, I mean, he set it all up. I didn't have to do anything. I just shaved my head one day. And then I was in Thailand the next day to kind of like get prepared. And then I flew to Bhutan, and I was up in the Himalayan range, like practicing my monkhood with hundreds of other Bhutanese monks at this temple that specialized in training monks for the Bhutanese Buddhist leadership. So, you know, I was hanging out with, you know, so many Rinpoche. Like Rinpoche are like Buddha reincarnations, like, because this is a special school, right? So you would have hundreds of monks, as in, like, I'm talking about like 700 monks. And this is very kind of like only no outsiders, because this is all Bhutanese. So I was just given this exceptional life opportunity. And so, yeah, so I was in Bhutan for a whole month, and I was up in the mountain, no electricity, no hot water. it was an amazing time as well, but it's very different as well. No internet, no. Basically, I was cut out from the outside world for a whole month. Yeah, because that was the promise. The promise I will do it for a month because I can only take a month off from work.
Was it cold?
Hell yeah! Oh my God, I was up in the mountains, man.
How did they stay warm?
By wearing a lot of clothes.
A lot of like the robes and stuff were warm. It was sufficient.
Yeah. I mean, like you just have to make do. Buddhism, there are two branches of Buddhism, right? The Chinese and the Vietnamese are different from the Thai and Sri Lankan and Indian, because the Thai are the original one. So you're only given 2 pieces of cloth.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, just 2 pieces of cloth. It's not just but there's a way of wearing it. I mean, I forgot how to. I've forgotten how to put it on, but there's a way of doing it, and you have to do it right. And so there's anyway.
And it keeps you warm. If you do it right, it keeps you warm.
No, you just have to put on blanket. You just have to wrap the blanket on. You don't wear, you're not allowed to wear any underwear. So it kind of like gets really a bit chilly down there, especially up in the Himalayan range, where there's no heater, no hot water. And other monks, I mean, like they can only have a shower once a week. I mean, like I had my own room, my own hut, not room, but I had my own hut, and we were able to heat up water and do it I don't know, the basic way. But it was yet another eye-opening experience.
What did you get out of that month?
Well, first of all, because I made a promise, so I had to sort of
honor it.
Promise, especially a promise made to Buddha. The second one was because at the time I was going through a pretty rough time in my personal life. I had sort of problems with my with the mother of my child. So I had to find a place where I can find some peace. So so yeah, it did me wonders, as in you learn to be not just humble, but to really think of life as not just about right and wrong. It's just about people's perceptions, and you have to accept it as part of life. You can't fight it, because that's just life, and every God has a plan for everyone, and don't ask why. Because like I used to think, why me? Why? And then you have to sit back and say, why not you? To really go back to the basics and to accept that as part of life, and there's nothing you can do about it. You have to accept it, and you have to go on, and you have to forgive. You can't forget, but you have to forgive. You're forced to forgive if you want to move on. You have to get rid of all the negative energy. And so it did wonders for me. I became more light, not so stuck with like, this is right, this is wrong, I'm right, you're wrong. No, I mean, like, it's okay. It's okay if you think I'm wrong. And it's okay that as long as you're at peace. Because I mean, I had to get up, and like the tradition was like, as soon as you can see the lines on your palms, that's when you start praying. And we were praying in Sanskrit, right? And in this language, I didn't understand whatever. So it really requires a lot of focus. Something so kind of like unscientific. so different from my world, you know. My world is like law and order, you know, like words matter. No, that these words, I don't understand anything, but I had to say it. And just sit there, sit still, and don't think about anything. And you know how difficult it is? You know how difficult it is not to think about anything? Like, even though I didn't have my phone with me, but within, I would say 10 minutes, my thought would be like a monkey, you know, jumping from refugees to mom, and mom to sisters, sisters to first wife to child to second wife, you know, like we can't sit still. And that was my first attempt at meditation, and my first attempt at just sitting there trying not to think. And it's difficult. The third thing I learned was that I was not cut for it. I mean, like, you know, for people who have a special calling for that, I think you have to have a special calling for that. I don't have it. The more they stay up in the Himalayan range, you know, in such a beautiful place, and it's just absolutely amazing, you know, when you hear hundreds of Tibetan and Bhutanese monks chanting, it's like a trance, right? And they have, unlike Vietnamese or Chinese, the Bhutanese and the Tibetan, they have music. Like they play with this music. So it's very mysterious. It's very different. It's like out of this world. And like in the morning, at night, you hear them praying and all this music playing, and like up in the top mountain, it's cold. And I think if you have a special calling, the more you stay up there, the more you feel like you want more. But for me, oh my God, I couldn't wait. I mean, the first week was okay, novelty. Second week was like, this is hard. Third week, damn, it's so difficult. And then fourth week, I was counting day by day if I just could finish my monkhood. And you can't just finish. You can't just walk off, you know. To become a monk, you have to go through this elaborate ceremony where you have to remember. It's not as if like you can just become a monk. You have to pass a test. And all these old monks will test you. So I spent 3 days learning tests in Sanskrit. Can you believe it? Wow. To pass this bloody test so I can become a monk. And then when you want to become, like you want to go back to normality, you have to go through another ceremony. And because I was not baptized, but I entered my monkhood by Thai tradition. I had to de-enter the monkhood by Thai tradition. So I had to wait for a Thai monk, not a Tibetan monk, a Thai monk to fly in to Bhutan, go up to the mountain, go through all these ceremonies so that I become a normal guy again. So it was, I'm not cut to be a monk. That's the lesson I've learned. No, been there, done that. I don't think I can do it again. It's too tough. It's too hard. I can't do it. Let me work on refugee issues, you know? Let me go and advocate for human rights and refugee rights. Let me go on stage and I don't know, like sing and dance. I mean, that's much, much better and much easier than being a monk.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, I think we covered a lot of ground today, and I appreciate, you know, your time and your energy. Again, I think we just scratched the surface. The next time we meet up, I hope we can do something in Vietnamese. Maybe do this all over again, but you know, do it in Vietnamese and see what
and see if your Vietnamese is better than mine.
No, my Vietnamese is definitely not better than yours for sure. I'm pretty sure my pronunciation is not as, I'm very sure of that. But I think that I can get some questions off, get some pointed questions. I think we can move in directions that are probably different than having this done in English. I haven't done any guests in English and Vietnamese. I've either done it all in Vietnamese or all in English. I think it would be a very cool experiment to do this in a few weeks when you have a free moment to to do it in Vietnamese.
Sure, mate.
Yeah. Thank you
Sure.
again. I really appreciate it. And, we'll catch up again very soon.
All right, mate.
Thanks, Hoy.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye.